Why do black and white Americans sound so different? As someone who is South Asian, this has always perplexed me. Why do black Americans and white Americans sound so dang different? I get there would be regional accents like a thick Southern accent or a NY accent. But even in like a particular region, why are the accents so distinct? I don't know if I've phrased this question properly, but I hope y'all understand as I am trying to say things without trying to offend anyone at all. I actually think it depends on the people you grow up around. If you spoke to me on the phone, you would think I was white. When I was young, I worked at a hotel. And when people would ask for me after speaking to me on the phone, I could see the gears in their head turning. I've always hated when people including my own damn family say I talk white. It's so ignorant. Most people are saying it's just different accents, but there were white kids in my school who tried to speak in AAVE but their voices still sounded white. I don't know if that's cause they didn't grow up speaking like that or whatever though. When I was in Mississippi a few years ago, everybody sounded exactly the same, man shrugging, medium light skin tone. Both my parents are black Americans, but my mom sounds more black than my dad. It heavily depends where you grew up, when you grew up, and which voice you hear in your head as you go throughout the day. I hear both use both person shrugging, medium skin tone, female sign tears of joy. The African American accent is a Southern dialect. They took it with them as they migrated from the South after the Civil War. It sometimes depends on the circumstances. And it's not just Americans. I was traveling in England and was given a lift by a woman who sounded to me like a Londoner. After a while she told me she was from Scotland and I mentioned her lack of accent. So she switched to a thick Scottish accent which I could barely understand. She explained that when in England she adopted an English accent, but when in Scotland went back to using her native Scottish accent. No idea, but no American sounds better than Morgan Freeman. Language is identity. This is not just about race. It's also about ethnicity, educational accomplishments, sexual identity, etc. Your accent conveys membership in all groups you care about. Huge missing piece of information here. Blacks migrated north from the South after slavery and brought with them a little country soul food? Same food my Southern belle grandma made. Combine that with failed Northern integration and you can see how the dialect progressed. But do all American blacks sound like that? Nope. But many are ridiculed by both white and black people if they sound too white. It's not just black people and white people. For example, there are distinctive Mexican ways of speaking too. Regardless of whether or not a person can speak Spanish. It's all cultural and community-based. I'd argue that most non-white Americans speak, sound, and act differently at home versus how we sound at work. It's called code switching. It helps us navigate socio-political realms. My mother is a white urban working-class Southern woman. She uses phrases and pronunciations that are found more often in the black community. If you heard a recording of her speaking, there's a good chance you'd think she's black. Up north, black and white people may speak very differently, but down here, if black and white people have a similar background, they'll sound very similar. It's not so much black versus white so much as raised in the hood versus raised in the suburbs. I know black people that speak white and white people that speak black, with the only common factor being where they were raised or live. While a lot of responses here are focusing on the segregation and cultural divides between whites and blacks in USA as a primary factor, it is of course an important factor. It is by no means the sole reason. In the UK, even when white and black people are raised with the same communities and share the same culture, it isn't hard to tell purely by listening if a speaker is black. I am by no means an expert in physiology, but there must be some genetic factors that affect the voice box that also contribute to the observed differences. I'm not American, but I have friends, white and black, who have lived there, and they report that in many places there is a huge separation between black and white people. So the culture is very different, including the way they speak. In a group I participate in, a black English girl also pointed this out. I feel like it's because there is still a separation of cultures in the US. White neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods, and not a lot of intermingling. Probably in areas where there is more integration between cultures, an accent emerges that is an amalgamation of all of them. It's code switching, and the pros can turn it off and on mid-sentence. Centuries of segregation. From early colonial America and slavery up until the 1900s, black people were forcibly segregated from white people and so developed their own subcultures, accents, and vernacular. Today it's generally considered very offensive to tell a black person you sound white or to sound more white. This is something that has always puzzled me. In Canada everyone just sounds Canadian. Depends on your home. I'm black and every single person I've ever been close to has told me on the phone I sound white. Culture. What I'd like to know is, where did a South Asian pick up the word dang? I think it depends on where you live and how much mixing there is in an individual's history. In addition to cultural thing, there is also the composition of the bodies, like bone structure of the skull, which could change how the sound travels. Sometimes it just be like that. It's crazy that some comments here are treating culturally ingrained black parlance and being well spoken as mutually exclusive. I invite anyone to go and listen to a podcast called Hood Politics. The host, rapper Propaganda, uses what you would immediately identify as a black linguistic style, but is still more concise and articulate than 90 of the people I know of any race or background. Look up AAVE. What I want to know is why two people with the same accent, one black and one white, often still sound different enough that I can tell which is which by voice alone. It's not just an accent. Word usage is different. Blacks tend to omit words like as and are. She is hungry versus she hungry. We are late versus we late. When you understand this, you'll notice how often certain words are not used. Racism. There is a large group of people that view speaking proper English as trying to be white, which is obviously evil to these people. Growing up, there was a black kid in my school whose black father was in the military. He was extremely smart, always spoke proper English, and was really nice. He got physically and verbally assaulted regularly by the black students in the school for being a race traitor and an Uncle Tom. Poor kid had to transfer schools. You are saying this because you watch movies, right? If you meet middle-class black people in America, many people sound white. For most of U.S. history, black and white people basically lived in separate countries. Black people weren't allowed in white-only places, and most white people actively avoided contact with black people who weren't working for them in some capacity. And when you have two groups of people who are so separated from each other, you get things like the development of totally different dialects. A lot of features of what we call African American vernacular are things that used to be common in North American English, like pronouncing ask as ax, but at some point white people stopped using them and black people didn't.